Hello crocheters, Vitania here from the Hobbyist on the Road. Today I'm going to show you how to crochet a cluster stitch. So here I have a little sample. This is for demonstration only. I'm not crocheting anything in particular. And what I've done, I've crocheted a bigger and a smaller cluster stitch. So here I went through the stitch 5 times and here just 3 times. Now the smaller stitch seems to be the more usual way that people crochet. So let's begin. Yarn over, go through your stitch, pull out, yarn over, and now go through 2 loops and stop. Okay, so we will go 2 more times through the same stitch, and that will make 3 times altogether. Second time, we go through 2 loops, only 2 loops, and stop. Yarn over, go through exactly the same stitch once more, and yarn over and go through the first 2 loops. Okay, now some people will tell you to count the loops and the hook. That's okay, but I prefer to count how many times I have to go through the same stitch. It's easier for me. Now we will yarn over and we have to pull through this yarn through all of these loops. It's important to keep your hook the right way. Don't hold it up like this or sideways. The best way to hold it is to keep it down, and then it will be easy to go through all of the loops and chain 1 on top. So this is your cluster stitch finished. Now the important thing is that this chain, it counts as a stitch. So if you want your cluster stitches to be distributed the way mine are, one next to another, you have to skip 1 stitch and then you'll do your next cluster into the second stitch. So we'll yarn over, skip 1, and we go through the second one. Okay, let's do another one. Go through 2 loops and stop. Yarn over, pull out once, yarn over, go through 2 loops. Okay, we stop here and then yarn over, go through the same stitch the 3rd time, yarn over, go through 2 loops. Now we yarn over and go through all of the loops, holding our hook correctly so that it would be easier to work, and then chain 1. This is our cluster stitch finished. One more time. We remember to skip this stitch. What happens if you don't skip this stitch? First of all, your clusters will be very close together. You won't have that nice subtle separation between them, and plus you will be adding stitches to your project. So basically you will be widening it, because if you see, this counts as 1 and it corresponds to this stitch down here. So if you do another one into this, so it's like an increase basically, and we don't want that. Okay, yarn over, skip 1, go through the next stitch, second time, go through 2 loops only, and the 3rd time, yarn over, go through the first 2 loops. Okay, now yarn over and go through all of the loops and chain 1. Okay, now on this same row I will show you also how I did this bigger one. All I did is, instead of going through the same stitch 3 times, I went 5 times, and that's how my stitch became, you know, kind of bigger, wider, and more textured. So I'll yarn over, skip 1, pull out, go through the first 2 loops. Now yarn over the second time, go through the same stitch, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we'll finish exactly the same. Yarn over, pull through all of the loops. See, it will be easier for me to do it if I hold my hook correctly, and chain 1. So you see how this stitch with 5, when I went 5 times through the same stitch, it's obviously bulkier, it's wider. So let's see. No, I won't be able to do on the last one here because I have to I have too few stitches. I'll have to skip 1 and then I need 2 more, but I have only 1 left. So I'll just double crochet into this into this last stitch. Chain 1. Now what I did here, I basically, if you want to build your work like this, what you do, you turn your work around and you go through with single crochet back, and then you will be working your cluster stitches from the front again. So this is how you crochet a cluster stitch. Now I will, in my next video, I'll show you the difference between cluster stitch and bobble stitch. Some people seem to confuse them, and I want to highlight certain aspects and how to differentiate. So now one last thing I wanted to say about cluster stitch is how it is marked in charts. There is some confusion sometimes about cluster stitch, bobble stitch, puff stitch, and maybe even popcorn stitch. Now, what happens in charts especially, there is this symbol that, hope you can see it. Okay, so this symbol, it can refer to 3 half double crochet cluster, but it can also refer to a bobble stitch or a puff stitch. So you have to be careful when you see this symbol in your chart. Just make sure you read the pattern and see which of the three your designer means when they mark this sign. Now, another way you will see cluster stitch marked is like this, and that's when it's a 3 double crochet cluster. And this symbol seems to refer only to a cluster, to a double crochet cluster. Now, I don't know if your cluster, say for example, your cluster has, you know, could be 5 double crochet. I don't know whether they would add additional 2 lines here, or and say 5 double crochet cluster, or if they would just use the same symbol and just write 5 here. So you'll have to read your chart and your pattern correctly, especially you know, especially at the start of your work, so as to get the right idea of what you're supposed to do with these symbols, how you're supposed to read them. I hope you enjoyed this lesson from me, Vitania, the hobbyist on the road. Have a nice day.